We all belong to groups. It's just a fundamental part of who we are. But what if that amazing sense of belonging has a hidden cost? Well, today we're digging into a powerful, invisible force that shapes our decisions and our values, the bias of belonging.
Just think for a second about the groups you belong to. Could be your favorite sports team, your family, maybe even just the people who love the same movies you do. It feels good to belong, right? Of course it does. But there's this fascinating and sometimes kind of troubling flip side. What happens in our brains the moment we draw that line between us and them?
So our journey starts with a basic human instinct, our need to form tribes. And this isn't some conscious choice we make. It's a deeply ingrained, totally automatic process that's happening in our brains all the time. And what's wild is how little it takes to kick this into gear. You don't need some ancient rivalry or a big conflict. Psychologists have found they can literally just randomly assign people to a red team or a blue team, and almost instantly, people start favoring their own group. And us versus them mentality just appears out of thin air. To see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at a classic study. Okay, so Duke University has this legendary basketball program, and getting tickets to a huge game is, well, it's basically impossible. So students enter a lottery. Now, before the drawing, they're all just one big group, hopeful Duke fans. But the second those names are called, they're instantly split into two brand new, totally arbitrary tribes, the lucky ones with tickets and the disappointed ones without.
And here's where the power of belonging just becomes crystal clear. Researchers asked both groups, hey, what are these tickets worth? The students who didn't win, they said they'd pay, around $175. Makes sense. But the students who owned a ticket, get this, they wouldn't sell for less than an astonishing $2,400. The only thing that changed was a lottery number. But in a flash, belonging to the owner group completely warped their perception of value.
Okay, so this bias doesn't just change how we value things, like a basketball ticket. The labels we wear, the groups we find ourselves in, can totally change how we see ourselves and what we think we're capable of. This quote from the behavioral economist Dan Ariely it nails it. These group identities, they aren't just external tags. They get inside our heads, and they can activate these powerful and often really conflicting expectations about ourselves.
And this whole phenomenon has a name. It's called stereotype threat. It's that nagging feeling, that little voice in the back of your head, that you might do something that confirms a negative stereotype about your group. And the pressure of that fear, well, it can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Let me tell you about a study with Asian American women that just perfectly illustrates this. So, before taking a really hard math test, one group was subtly reminded of their Asian heritage, a group often stereotyped as being good at math. A second group was reminded of their gender, a group stereotyped as being, well, weaker at math. The results were just stark. The women reminded of their Asian identity performed better, while those reminded of their female identity performed worse. Think about that. They were the same people with the exact same skills, but the label that was active in their minds, it changed everything.
So our group identity can shape how we see ourselves, but it can also hijack our moral compass, pointing us in directions we'd never dream of going if we were alone.
We all like to think we have this solid, fixed moral code. But the truth is, it's surprisingly flexible. When we're in a situation and we're not sure what to do, we often outsource our decisions. We look around the room, see what everyone else is doing, and that becomes our new social norm for what's okay.
An incredible experiment highlights this perfectly. People were paid based on how many math problems they could solve. The control group couldn't cheat. Simple as that. The shredder group, they could cheat a little bit by shredding their answer sheet and just telling the experimenter how many they got right. But the third group, oh, this is where it gets really interesting. They watched an actor posing as another student finish super early, stand up and announce, "I solved everything, give me my money." He gets paid and walks out, making it really clear that cheating isn't just possible, it's kind of the norm here.
The results? They were staggering. The control group solved about 3 problems. The group that could cheat claimed they solved around 5.5. But the group that saw the actor openly cheat, their average shot up to over 7. That one person's action didn't just give them permission to cheat, it signaled a whole new social norm. Oh, I guess cheating is what we do here. Honesty wasn't some internal value, it was a social contract that had just been torn to shreds.
So we've seen that groups can change our perception of value, and even our sense of right and wrong. But maybe the most powerful thing they do is define the boundaries of our empathy. There's a really well-documented phenomenon that explains this. It's called the identifiable victim effect. See, our brains just aren't wired to feel for a statistic. We're wired to feel for a person, a face, a story. A single story can move us to act in a way that just overwhelming numbers can't.
Look at this number, 3 million children. I mean, it's a tragedy, of course it is, but it's so massive that it feels abstract, it's distant. It's hard for our minds to really grasp that scale of suffering, and because of that, our emotional response is often kind of muted.
Now, let me tell you about Rokia. She's 7 years old, she lives in Mali, and her life is at risk because she doesn't have enough to eat. All of a sudden, the problem isn't a statistic anymore, is it? It has a face, it has a name.
And this is exactly what researchers found. When people were given the statistics about the food crisis in Mali, they donated about 23% of their earnings from the experiment. But when they were told Rokia's story, they donated 48%. That's more than double. Rokia's story broke through all that statistical noise, and it activated their circle of care.
Okay, so we're wired to think us versus them. We're swayed by labels and social pressure, and our empathy is drawn to one person, not the masses. It's a pretty sobering picture of our own psychology. But that's not the end of the story.
And this is the critical question, isn't it? If these biases are just a fundamental part of our mental hardware, are we just stuck with them? Or is there a way to consciously override our own programming?
Well, the answer really lies in awareness. The simple act of knowing that we have these irrational tendencies is our greatest weapon. When we recognize that our empathy kind of fails at scale, we can consciously correct for it. We can see a big number and challenge ourselves to find the Rokia within that statistic.
Look, we might never totally eliminate these biases. They're a part of our evolutionary code, but by understanding them, by being aware of the pull of the in-group, the weight of a label, the weird limits of our empathy, we give ourselves a choice. A choice to pause, to question our first instincts, and to consciously ask, who's inside my us? And can I draw that circle just a little bit wider? Awareness isn't the cure, but it is the beginning of a more thoughtful, more empathetic way of being in the world.